You need to find somewhere else to live, Denise. I can't do this anymore." My daughter-in-law Simone said those words to me 3 weeks after we buried my son. 3 weeks after I stood in that cemetery watching them lower Andre into the ground while his wife checked her phone twice during the service. I'm Denise Hollowell, 60 years old, and I'd just been asked to leave my own house. I looked at Simone standing in the doorway of the garage apartment where I'd been living for 2.5 years. She was holding a coffee mug that cost $45, wearing athleisure that probably ran $200, looking at me like I was a problem that needed solving. "I understand this is hard," she continued, her voice taking on that patient tone people use when they think you're not quite getting it, "but I need space to process my grief. Having you here is just a constant reminder of everything I've lost." I didn't say anything. Sometimes the best response is silence. "I mean, you have to understand my position. I'm 28 years old. I just lost my husband. I can't be responsible for taking care of his mother, too. It's not fair to me." Taking care of me. That's what she thought she'd been doing. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Because what Simone didn't know, what she'd never bothered to learn in 3 years of marriage to my son, was that she'd been living in my house, eating food I'd paid for, driving a car I'd helped buy, and she was about to find that out the hard way. Let me back up and explain how I got here. How a woman who'd spent 37 years building a quiet fortune ended up sleeping in a converted garage apartment while her son and his wife lived in the main house. I started as a medical billing clerk at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis in 1985. 22 years old, fresh out of a 2-year program at Southwest Community College, making $8.75 an hour. It wasn't glamorous work. I sat in a windowless office processing insurance claims, arguing with insurance companies about coverage, making sure doctors got paid for the care they provided. But it was steady. And steady meant something when you were a single black woman raising a baby boy alone. Andre's father had disappeared before Andre turned 2. Child support never came. It was just me and my son, and a determination that he'd have better than I'd had. I worked my way up over 18 years, billing clerk to senior clerk to supervisor to department manager. By 2003, I was running the entire billing department at Baptist Memorial, making $67,000 a year. Good money for Memphis. Enough to buy my first house in 1998, a small 3-bedroom in Parkway Village. Enough to start thinking about investments. That's when I bought my first rental property. A duplex in Fraser, $68,000. The neighborhood wasn't fancy, but the numbers worked. I fixed it up myself on weekends, learned basic repairs from YouTube videos, rented both units for $650 each. After mortgage and expenses, I cleared about $400 a month. I bought another property in 2005, then another in 2008, right after the housing crash when prices dropped. By 2010, I owned 4 rental units and my own home. I was managing them myself, collecting rent, fixing toilets, repainting between tenants. People at the hospital would see me in my work clothes, grease under my fingernails from fixing a sink, and make assumptions. Denise is handy. Denise doesn't mind getting her hands dirty. Denise is so down to earth. What they meant was, Denise doesn't have money for a plumber. Denise can't afford to hire help. Denise is poor. In 2015, I started my own medical billing consultancy, Hollowell Medical Solutions. I'd spent 30 years learning how to navigate insurance companies, how to maximize reimbursements, how to reduce claim denials. Small clinics and private practices needed that expertise, but couldn't afford full-time billing staff. I ran that business from my dining room table for 7 years. Built it up to serving 23 medical practices across Memphis. I was making more than I'd ever made at the hospital, but nobody saw that. What they saw was a woman working from home in sweatpants, driving a 2006 Honda Accord with 190,000 miles on it. In 2022, a larger healthcare services company made me an offer. They wanted my client list, my systems, my reputation. $380,000 for a business I'd built in my dining room. I took it. At 58 years old, I had 5 rental properties paid off, $380,000 from the business sale, and my own home with no mortgage. My net worth was $1,400,000, and not a single person in my life knew it. Not my friends at church, not my neighbors, not even my son Andre, who'd borrowed $67,000 from me over the 6 years before he died. Money for his student loans, for his credit card debt, for the engagement ring he'd bought Simone for their honeymoon in Cancun. Every time he'd asked, I'd given. Every time he'd promised to pay me back eventually, I'd told him not to worry about it. "You're my son," I'd say. "I just want you to be happy." What I didn't say was that I was building his inheritance, that every dollar I gave him was a dollar he wouldn't have to earn himself, that I was trying to give him the financial cushion I'd never had. But Andre never asked where the money came from, and I never told him. Because telling him would mean explaining that I had $1.4 million, and explaining that would mean he'd tell Simone, and I already knew what Simone thought of me. I'd seen it in her eyes at their engagement party 3 years ago. I'd shown up straight from collecting rent, wearing jeans and a Baptist Memorial t-shirt I'd kept from my hospital days. Simone's parents were there, her father in a blazer, her mother in pearls. They worked in corporate offices, drove new cars, lived in Germantown. Simone had introduced me to her friends with an apologetic smile. "This is Andre's mom. She works in medical billing." Works, present tense. Like I was still clerking in a windowless office, like I hadn't managed a department or built a business or accumulated more wealth than her parents would likely see in their lifetimes. But I'd smiled and nodded and let them think what they wanted to think. That was my first mistake, the first of many times I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up, the first step toward ending up in a garage apartment being told to find somewhere else to live. Now, standing there, listening to Simone explain why she needed me gone, I realized something. I'd spent 3 years protecting my son's pride, letting him look like the provider, letting Simone believe they were living in a house Andre had somehow afforded, letting them both think I was the one being helped instead of the one doing the helping. And my son was dead, and none of that protection had mattered. The day Andre brought Simone home to meet me, I was on my hands and knees fixing a leaking pipe under the kitchen sink. It was a Saturday afternoon in March 2021, and I'd just come from collecting rent at one of my properties in Fraser. "Mom, we're here," Andre called out, and I heard a woman's voice say something I couldn't quite catch, followed by my son's nervous laugh. I pulled myself out from under the sink, wiped my hands on my jeans, and there she was. Simone Lancaster, 25 years old, wearing a cream-colored sweater that probably cost more than my monthly utility bill. "Mom, this is Simone. Simone, this is my mom, Denise." Simone's smile was polite, but didn't reach her eyes. She was taking in my appearance, the house, everything. I watched her gaze move from my grease-stained t-shirt to the modest furnishings, the worn carpet, the kitchen that hadn't been updated since 1998. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Hollowell. Andre has told me so much about you. Call me Denise, please. And I apologize for the mess. Plumbing emergency." "Oh, you do your own repairs?" There was something in her tone, not quite judgment but close. "When I can. Saves money on plumbers." She smiled again, that same polite smile. "That's very practical." Practical. That word would come up a lot over the next 3 years. 6 months later, Andre proposed. He'd saved for a year, he told me, but the ring he wanted cost $8,500, and he was still $3,000 short. Could I help just this once? He'd pay me back as soon as he got his next bonus at work. I wrote the check that afternoon, watched him sign the promissory note I'd prepared, the same kind I'd had him sign for every loan. Not because I needed the documentation for myself, but because I wanted him to understand that money meant something. That borrowing had consequences. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. Simone's going to love it. Does Simone know you're borrowing money for the ring? I'll tell her eventually. After we're married. When my finances are more stable. Eventually. That word would also come up a lot. The wedding was set for October 2021. Simone's parents hosted an engagement party at their country club in Germantown. I showed up in my best dress, the navy one I wore to church, and immediately felt out of place. Simone's mother, Patricia Lancaster, was a mortgage broker at a commercial real estate firm. Her father, Ronald, was a regional sales director for a pharmaceutical company. They lived in a subdivision where the median home price was $450,000. They drove matching Lexus SUVs. So, Denise, Andre tells us you work in medical billing, Patricia said, holding a glass of white wine. I used to work at Baptist Memorial. Now I run my own medical billing consultancy. Oh, how interesting. Working from home? Yes, it allows me flexibility. That's wonderful. Not everyone is cut out for the corporate world. She smiled. Some people prefer a simpler lifestyle. Simpler lifestyle. Translation: you don't have ambition. I wanted to tell her that my simple lifestyle had built a 7-figure net worth, that my rental properties generated more passive income than her salary, that I'd just paid off my last mortgage and was completely debt-free at 57 years old. But I didn't. Because Andre was standing nearby, looking proud as Simone showed off her ring to her sorority sisters, and I didn't want to embarrass him by revealing that his mother had more money than his future in-laws. 2 months before the wedding, Andre came to me again. Mom, we have a problem. The venue wants $18,000 up front, and we don't have it. Simone's parents already committed to paying for the rehearsal dinner and the flowers. I can't ask them for more. What about your savings? I've been paying down my student loans, trying to get my credit score up before we buy a house. How much do you need? I hate to ask, but could you cover the venue? I'll pay you back over the next 2 years. I promise. I paid for the venue. And when the catering came in over budget, I paid the difference. And when their honeymoon package cost more than expected, I covered that too. By the time they said I do, I'd spent $38,000 on a wedding where Simone's friends commented on how beautiful everything was and how lucky Andre was to marry into such a wonderful family. Nobody mentioned me. I was just there, present but invisible. After the wedding, they moved into an apartment in Midtown, $1,400 a month, which was stretching their budget. Andre made $58,000 at his IT support job. Simone made $72,000 in corporate marketing. Combined, they were pulling in about $130,000 gross, maybe $85,000 after taxes. But Simone had expensive taste: designer handbags, regular spa appointments, wine tastings with her girlfriends, weekend trips to Nashville and Atlanta. Andre was trying to keep up, putting charges on credit cards, telling himself he'd pay them off next month. 6 months into the marriage, he borrowed another $12,000 to pay down credit cards before Simone found out how high they'd gotten. She grew up with money, Mom. She's used to a certain lifestyle. I just need to get my finances stable. Andre, you can't build stability on borrowed money. I know. This is the last time. I swear. It wasn't the last time. It was never the last time. In spring 2022, they started talking about buying a house. Simone wanted something in Germantown, near her parents. Houses there started at $350,000. On their income, with Andre's damaged credit and minimal savings, they weren't qualifying for much. Mom, I hate to ask, but what if you co-signed, just to help us get better terms? You wouldn't have to pay anything. It would just be your name on the loan for credit purposes. Andre, I can't co-sign a loan for a house you can't afford. We can afford it. We just need help getting approved. If you need help getting approved, that's the bank telling you that you can't afford it. He'd gotten quiet then. Hurt. I just thought you'd want to help me. After everything, meaning after raising him alone, after all the sacrifices, after all the money I'd already given him, the guilt card. That's when I made my offer. Or my mistake, depending on how you looked at it. What if you lived in my house, rent-free, save up for a proper down payment, build your credit back up. In 2 or 3 years, you'll be in a much better position to buy. Live with you? I'll move into the garage apartment, give you 2 the main house, privacy, space to build your marriage. I'd converted the garage into a small apartment years ago when I was thinking about renting it out. 1 bedroom, bathroom, kitchenette, about 450 square feet. Enough for me, more than enough. Andre had hesitated, but Simone made the decision. That could work, just temporarily, until we save enough. Temporarily. That word again. We moved in July 2022. I took my bedroom furniture to the garage apartment, left everything else in the main house. Told them to treat it like their own. Simone redecorated immediately. New couch, $3,200. Dining table, $1,800. Bedroom set, $4,500. She put it all on credit, planning to pay it off gradually. When the bills came due and they were short, Andre borrowed another $8,500 from me. Last time, Mom, I promise. Once we save up our down payment, we'll be out of your hair. I'd been in the garage apartment for 6 months when I realized Simone had no idea the house was mine. She thought it was Andre's, thought he'd inherited it or somehow bought it before they met. She'd never asked, and he'd never corrected her assumption. I heard her on the phone with her mother one day, talking loud enough that her voice carried across the yard. No, we're not paying rent. It's Andre's house. From his family. We're just letting his mom stay in the garage apartment temporarily until she gets her finances together. Until I got my finances together. She thought I was the charity case, thought she was doing me a favor by letting me sleep in a converted garage on my own property. And I said nothing. Because saying something meant revealing everything. And I'd already decided that protecting Andre's pride was more important than protecting my own dignity. 2.5 years. That's how long I lived in that garage apartment, while Simone redecorated my house and Andre borrowed money he couldn't repay. The disrespect wasn't loud or obvious. It was small things, constant things, the kind of things that accumulate like dust until you realize you're suffocating. Simone would have her book club friends over, and I'd hear them through the window. This house has such good bones. Simone's done an amazing job making it feel modern. Like the house hadn't existed before she'd touched it. Like I hadn't picked out every fixture, painted every wall, planted every shrub in the yard. When her parents visited, Simone introduced me as Andre's mom, who's staying with us for a while. Staying with them. In my own house. I'd be in the garage apartment, and I'd hear Ronald tell Andre, "You're a good son, taking care of your mother like this. Not every man would make that sacrifice." Sacrifice. Andre would nod, accept the compliment, never correct the assumption. The comments about my work were the worst. Simone's friends were all corporate professionals, marketing directors, account executives, HR managers. They worked in glass office buildings downtown, had business cards with impressive titles, talked about quarterly reviews and performance bonuses. One evening, I was walking to my apartment when I overheard Simone talking to a friend on the patio. "What does Andre's mom do?" the friend asked. "She used to work in medical billing. Now she does some consulting from home. It's not really a career, more like a hobby. She processes insurance paperwork for small clinics." A hobby. 37 years of work reduced to a hobby. "That must be nice, not having real job pressure," the friend said. "I guess. I couldn't do it. I need the structure of an office, the validation of climbing a corporate ladder. But some people are fine with just getting by. Just getting by. While I paid their property taxes, while I covered the shortfall when their credit cards maxed out, while I made sure they had a roof over their heads. Andre would defend me sometimes, but weakly. Mom worked hard her whole life. She deserves to take it easy now. Take it easy. Like I was retired and feeble, instead of semi-retired and strategic. The money requests became more frequent. Car repairs, $2,300. HVAC replacement, $6,800. Simone's medical bills from a minor surgery, $4,100. Each time, Andre would come to the garage apartment, apologetic but insistent. I know I owe you a lot already, but we're in a tight spot. Just until my next bonus. The bonus never came, or when it did, it went to other expenses. The running total in my ledger grew, $67,000 over 6 years. I had every promissory note, every signed IOU, every text message confirming the amounts. But I never pressed him for repayment. Because he was my son. Because I wanted him to have an easier life than I'd had. Because I believed that loving him meant making things easier for him. What I didn't realize was that I was teaching him that money had no consequences, that borrowing had no cost, that his mother's resources were infinite and freely available. And I was teaching Simone that I was insignificant, that medical billing work was beneath her corporate sophistication, that the woman in the garage apartment was someone to be tolerated, not respected. I'd watch them come and go. Simone, in her BMW, paid for partly with my $8,500 check. Andre in his sensible sedan, insurance and repairs covered by emergency loans from me. They'd head out to dinner, to brunches, to weekend getaways, living a lifestyle that exceeded their income by thousands of dollars a month. And they could do it because I was the safety net. The silent bank. The mother who would never say no. My friend Lorraine from church asked me once, "Denise, why are you living in a garage apartment? You told me years ago you owned rental properties. Don't you have your own place?" It's complicated. Family situation. Family shouldn't have you sleeping in a garage, complicated or not. But I couldn't explain it to Lorraine. Couldn't explain that I was choosing this. That I'd decided protecting Andre's pride was worth sacrificing my own comfort. That I believed staying quiet about my wealth was better than creating conflict. In February 2024, Andre started having chest pains. He'd been stressed at work, putting in long hours, trying to earn that promotion that would finally stabilize their finances. Simone pushed him to see a doctor, but he kept putting it off. I can't afford to take time off right now, and the copay on the cardiologist is $150. I wanted to tell him I'd pay the $150. I wanted to tell him I'd pay for any test, any treatment, anything that would make sure he was okay. But he didn't ask, and I didn't offer, and 2 months later, he collapsed at work. Heart attack. Massive. He was 32 years old. They called me from the hospital. By the time I got there, he was already gone. Just gone. My son, my only child, the person I'd built everything for. Simone was in the waiting room, phone in her hand, scrolling through something. She looked up when I arrived, her face blank with shock. They said it was fast. He didn't suffer. I nodded, unable to speak. Unable to process that my boy was dead. That all those years of working, saving, providing, had led to this moment where none of it mattered because he was gone. At the funeral, Simone's friends surrounded her, offering sympathy, telling her how strong she was. I stood apart, watching them lower my son into the ground, and nobody came to stand with me. I was the mother. But in Simone's world, I was just the woman from the garage apartment. Someone peripheral. Someone insignificant. 3 weeks later, she asked me to leave. The morning of Andre's funeral, I woke up in the garage apartment at 5 a.m. Couldn't sleep. Kept seeing him at 6 years old, then 12, then 20, then 32. All those versions of my son playing in my head like a film reel. I couldn't stop. I put on my black dress, the same one I'd worn to my mother's funeral 8 years ago. Looked at myself in the mirror and saw a 60-year-old woman who'd worked her whole life to give her son security, only to lose him anyway. The service was at 11 a.m. at Mount Olive Baptist Church. Simone had planned everything, chosen the flowers, picked the music, written the obituary. She'd asked my opinion on nothing. I sat in the front pew. Simone sat 3 feet away from me, surrounded by her parents, her friends, her sorority sisters. There was physical distance between us, but the real distance was wider. She was the grieving widow, young and tragic. I was just there. During the eulogy, the pastor talked about Andre's kindness, his work ethic, his love for his wife. He mentioned that Andre had taken care of his mother in her later years, providing her with housing and support. Providing me with housing, in my own house. Even the pastor had it backwards. I glanced at Simone. She was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, nodding at the words, believing them. She genuinely thought Andre had been supporting me. At the burial, it was cold. October wind cutting through the cemetery. They lowered my boy into the ground while Simone checked her phone twice. I saw her do it. Once during the final prayer, once right after. Later, I'd tell myself she was in shock. That grief makes people do strange things. That checking her phone was a coping mechanism, a way to disconnect from unbearable reality. But in that moment, standing there watching my son disappear into the earth, I felt something crack inside me, not my grief. Something else, the part of me that had been bending and accommodating and staying silent for 2.5 years. Back at the house, Simone's friends filled my kitchen, my living room, my space. They brought casseroles and sympathy cards and treated me like a distant relative who'd shown up uninvited. "Can I get you anything, Mrs. Hollowell?" one of them asked, hovering near my own refrigerator like she lived there. "No, thank you. I'm fine." "It's so generous of Simone to let you stay here during this difficult time. Family is so important. Let me stay here during this difficult time." I excused myself, walked back to the garage apartment, closed the door, sat on my bed and looked at my hands, working hands. Hands that had processed thousands of insurance claims, collected rent from dozens of tenants, fixed countless broken pipes and leaking faucets. Hands that had signed check after check to my son because I loved him and wanted him to be happy. 3 weeks passed. I barely left the garage apartment except to sit in the main house for a few hours each day, trying to feel close to Andre. Simone avoided me mostly. We'd pass each other, exchange awkward condolences, retreat to our separate spaces. I thought we were both grieving in our own ways. I thought we'd eventually talk, maybe find some connection in our shared loss. Then came that Saturday morning, October 22nd. Simone knocked on my door at 9 a.m., holding her expensive coffee mug, wearing her athleisure uniform. "Denise, we need to talk." I let her in. She didn't sit, just stood there, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I've been thinking about the living situation, and I've decided I need space. Real space. To process everything, to figure out my next steps. I understand. Take all the time you need." "No, I mean I need you to find somewhere else to live." The words hung there. I stared at her, processing. "You want me to move out? I know this is hard, but I'm 28 years old. I just lost my husband. I can't be responsible for taking care of you too. It's not fair to me." Taking care of me. The phrase echoed in my head. "I've been looking at senior living communities," she continued. "There's a really nice place called Germantown Senior Residences. It's only $1,400 a month, and they have activities. You'd have people your own age around. It might be good for you." $1,400 a month. For me to pay rent somewhere else, so she could have my house to herself. What about Andre's things? His room? I'll pack everything up for you. You can take whatever you want. Photos, clothes, whatever means something to you. She was being generous, letting me take my dead son's belongings from my own house. Simone, does Andre's father know about this? His family? Andre's father had reappeared briefly for the funeral after 30 years of absence, left before the burial was even finished. This is my decision, Denise. I'm Andre's widow. This is my home now, and I need to move forward with my life. Her home, my house, my property, my 26 years of mortgage payments, but her home. Something in my face must have changed because Simone's expression shifted, defensive. I know you probably think I'm being selfish, but my therapist says I need to establish boundaries, that I can't let guilt keep me in situations that aren't healthy. Your therapist? Yes. I've been seeing someone since Andre died. She's helped me realize that I've been putting everyone else's needs before my own, including yours. My needs. The woman who'd been living rent-free in my house for 2.5 years, driving a car I'd helped pay for, eating food I'd subsidized, was worried about putting my needs before hers. When do you want me out? I was thinking 1 week. Is that reasonable? I can help you look at places if you want. 1 week to leave my own house. I looked at Simone, really looked at her, and I realized something I should have seen years ago. She had no idea, none. Not about the house, not about the money, not about anything real. And my son had kept it from her. Had let her believe a fiction because it was easier than the truth. That's when I smiled, just a small smile, the kind that comes when you know something the other person doesn't. Is that so? I said quietly. And Simone, mistaking my calm for acceptance, relaxed. I'm glad you understand. I'll give you some space to process this. She left, closed the door gently behind her, like she was being considerate of my feelings. I sat there on my bed, in my garage apartment, on my property, and made a decision. It was time to stop being silent. Monday morning, I called Jerome Washington, the lawyer who'd handled the sale of my medical billing business 2 years ago. He'd also prepared all the promissory notes Andre had signed over the years. Denise, I'm so sorry about Andre. How are you holding up? I'm managing. Jerome, I need to talk to you about some legal matters, estate matters. Of course. When would you like to come in? Today, if possible. I met him at his office in East Memphis at 2 p.m. Brought my banker's box with me. Inside, the deed to my house, documentation for all 5 rental properties, Andre's promissory notes totaling $67,000, receipts for the wedding I'd paid for, the car down payment, every loan, every payment, everything. Jerome spread the documents across his conference table, reviewing each one carefully. He was quiet for a long time. Denise, does Simone know about any of this? No, Andra never told her. Does she know you own the house she's living in? She thinks it was Andre's. I never corrected that assumption. Jerome leaned back in his chair, processing. So she's asked you to move out of your own property. She's giving me 1 week to find a senior living community. And she has no idea she's been living rent-free in your house for 2.5 years. None. Jerome was quiet again, then asked the question I'd been asking myself for 3 days. What do you want to do here, Denise? I don't know. That's why I'm here. Let me explain the legal situation. The house is solely in your name, correct? Yes. I bought it in 1998. Never added Andre to the deed. Then Simone has no legal claim to the property. As Andre's widow, she inherits his estate, but his estate doesn't include your house. What does his estate include? Jerome pulled out a notepad. We'll need to go through probate, but from what you've told me, Andre's assets were minimal. The car he drove, any personal possessions, his bank accounts. What were his debts? He owed me $67,000 in documented loans. He had about $18,000 in credit card debt. maybe $32,000 left on his car loan. Student loans were around $24,000. Jerome did the math. So roughly $141,000 in total debt. What were his assets worth? The car is maybe worth $12,000. He had about $3,200 in his checking account. His 401k had maybe $15,000. So, his estate is insolvent. His debts exceed his assets by over $100,000. I felt something tighten in my chest. My son had died with more debt than assets. All those years of borrowing, of trying to keep up, of wanting to provide for Simone, and he'd left nothing but obligations. The loans Andre owed you, Jerome continued, those are legitimate debts to his estate. As his creditor, you'd have a claim. But Denise, I need to ask you something. Do you want to pursue that claim? What do you mean? I mean, are you planning to demand repayment from Simone? Force her to settle Andre's debts to you? I thought about that, about my daughter-in-law who'd just lost her husband, who was grieving in her own way, who had no idea the financial reality she was about to face. I don't know, I don't want to be cruel. It's not cruel to expect repayment of legitimate debts, but it is a choice. You could forgive the debt, write it off. What happens if I don't forgive it? Then Simone, as the beneficiary of Andre's estate, is responsible for settling his debts to the extent the estate has assets. She'd have to sell his car, liquidate his accounts, use his 401k. And even then, there wouldn't be enough to cover what he owed you. So she'd still owe me $50,000 plus after liquidating everything. Roughly, yes. And she'd have no legal grounds to remain in your house. You could initiate eviction proceedings whenever you chose. Eviction. The word felt harsh. Final. How long does probate take? In Tennessee, minimum 4 months if there are no complications. Could be 6 to 8 months if there are disputes or complex assets. And Simone will learn about all of this during probate? She'll have to. The estate has to be inventoried. All debts have to be documented. She'll discover that Andre owned no real property, that he died with significant debt, that the house she thinks is hers actually belongs to you. I stared at the documents spread across Jerome's table. 37 years of work, 26 years of property ownership, 6 years of loans to a son who'd promised to pay me back eventually. What would you do, Jerome? If this was your family? He was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I'd ask myself what I'm trying to accomplish. Are you trying to teach Simone a lesson, protect your assets, punish her for disrespecting you, or are you just trying to reclaim your home and your life? I don't know. Maybe all of that. Then you need to figure that out before you make any legal moves. Because once you start this process, once Simone learns the truth, your relationship with her is over. Whatever connection you might have had through Andre, whatever possibility of family, it's gone. We don't have a relationship now. You have the possibility of one. You have shared grief. You both loved Andre. That's something. But if you evict her, if you demand repayment of debts, if you expose that she's been living in your house while treating you like a charity case, you become the villain in her story, forever. Even though I'm the one who's been wronged, especially because you've been wronged, people don't forgive people who prove they've been fools. I gathered up the documents, put them back in the box. What do I need to do right now? Right now? Nothing. The probate process will start automatically. Simone will receive notification of her responsibilities as beneficiary. She'll learn that she needs to inventory Andre's assets and debts. And at some point, probably within the next 4 to 6 weeks, she'll discover the truth. And then she'll probably call you, and you'll have to decide what kind of person you want to be in that conversation. I left Jerome's office with more questions than answers. I had the legal right to reclaim my house, to demand repayment, to evict Simone. But did I have the moral right? And if I did, what would it cost me? The probate notice arrived at the house on November 8th, 17 days after Simone had asked me to leave. I was in the garage apartment when I heard her car pull into the driveway early, around 3 p.m. She normally didn't get home from work until after 6. 10 minutes later, she was knocking on my door. Hard. Urgent. "Denise, we need to talk. Right now." I opened the door. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. She was holding a stack of legal documents. "What is this? What the hell is this?" "You'll need to be more specific." "This letter from probate court. It says I'm the beneficiary of Andre's estate. It says I need to inventory his assets and debts. It says he owned no real property." "That sounds accurate." "No real property? What about this house? What about our house?" "Our house." She still believed it. "Simone, maybe you should sit down." "I don't want to sit down. I want you to explain why the probate court is saying Andre didn't own any property." I stepped aside, let her into my small apartment. She stayed standing, clutching the papers like they might blow away. "Andre didn't own this house," I said quietly. "I do. I bought it in 1998. I've paid the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, everything, for 26 years. The color drained further from her face. "That's not possible. Andre told me this was his family home. He said it came from your side of the family. He let you believe that. But he never actually said he owned it, did he?" She was thinking back. I could see it. Trying to remember exact conversations, exact words. Realizing maybe he'd been vague. Maybe he'd never explicitly claimed ownership. "But we've been living here for 2.5 years. You moved into the garage so we could have the main house. I moved into the garage apartment to give you and Andre privacy. I offered you the use of my house rent-free so you could save for your own down payment. You said we could stay here temporarily." I did. I thought temporarily meant a year, maybe 2, not forever. Simone sat down then, heavily, on my small couch. "I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me?" "Andre asked me not to. He wanted you to think he was providing for you. He was embarrassed that he couldn't afford the kind of house you wanted. So you just let me believe a lie?" "I let my son protect his pride. Maybe that was wrong. But he was my son, and I wanted him to be happy." She was reading through the probate documents now, her hands still shaking. "It says here that Andre's estate has to document all debts. It lists you as a creditor for $67,000. What is that?" "Loans. Over the past 6 years. Money Andre borrowed from me." "What money? What are you talking about?" I walked to my desk, pulled out my own folder. The one with copies of every promissory note, every signed agreement. Handed it to her. She read through them, her expression changing from confusion to disbelief to something like horror. $3,000 for your engagement ring. $38,000 for your wedding. $8,500 down payment for your car. $12,000 to pay off credit cards. $6,800 for the HVAC replacement. Andre told me he'd saved for the ring. He told me his bonus covered the wedding expenses. He told me his tax refund paid for the car. He told you what he needed to tell you to maintain the image he wanted. And you just gave him money? You just let him lie to me? I gave my son money because he asked for it, because I loved him, because I wanted to help him build a life with you." Simone was crying now, angry tears. "You let me think I was marrying someone financially stable. You let me believe we were building something together, but it was all your money, all of it." "Not all of it. Andre worked hard. He contributed." "Contributed what?" "You paid for our wedding, our car, our bills. You've been subsidizing our entire life, and I didn't even know it. I was helping my son. You were enabling him. You were teaching him that he didn't have to be responsible because Mom would always bail him out." Her voice was getting louder, sharper. "Do you know what else is in here?" It says Andre had $18,000 in credit card debt, $24,000 in student loans. His car loan is $32,000. He died owing almost $150,000 and left me with $30,000 in assets. I know. You know? You knew he was drowning in debt, and you just kept giving him more money? I thought I was helping him stay afloat. You were helping him sink slower. There's a difference. The words hit hard because they were true. I had been enabling. I had been preventing Andre from facing the reality of his choices. And now he was gone and couldn't face anything, and Simone was left holding the wreckage. I'm sorry, I said. I thought I was doing the right thing. The right thing? The right thing would have been to tell him no. To let him fail. To let him figure out he couldn't afford the life he was trying to live. He was my son, and I was his wife. But you never thought about me, did you? You never thought about what it would do to me to discover that my entire marriage was built on borrowed money and lies. I thought about you. I thought about both of you. No, you thought about protecting Andre, protecting his ego, protecting his pride, even if it meant I'd find out after he died that nothing was real. She stood up, wiping her eyes, trying to compose herself. So what happens now? The probate documents say I'm responsible for settling his estate debts. Do you expect me to pay you back the $67,000? The question hung between us, the one I'd been wrestling with since my meeting with Jerome. I don't know, I said honestly. You don't know? Denise. I'm 28 years old. I just lost my husband. I make $72,000 a year. I have $8,000 in my savings account. How exactly am I supposed to pay you back $67,000? The estate would liquidate Andre's assets first. His car, his 401k, his bank accounts. That would cover about $30,000 of the debt. And the other $37,000? Where does that come from? I don't know. And this house? What about this house? Am I supposed to just leave? Find somewhere else to live? Pay rent somewhere while I'm also paying off my dead husband's debts? I gave you 1 week to find somewhere else. Remember? You're the one who told me to move into a senior living community. Simone stared at me, and I watched understanding dawn on her face. That's what this is about. I asked you to leave, and now you're punishing me. I'm not punishing you. I'm telling you the truth you should have known from the beginning. After Andre died, you waited until he was dead to destroy everything. I waited until you asked me to leave my own house to stop pretending. She was pacing now, agitated, the probate documents crumpled in her hand. So what do you want, Denise? You want me to apologize? Fine. I'm sorry I asked you to leave. I'm sorry I didn't know this was your house. I'm sorry I didn't realize my husband was broke and borrowing money from his mother to pretend he could provide for me. I don't want an apology. Then what do you want? That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? Respect? Too late for that. Gratitude? Meaningless now? My son back? Impossible. I want to understand something, I said. Why did you treat me the way you did? What are you talking about? The comments about my work, the way you introduced me to your friends, the assumptions about my finances, the way you looked at me like I was something to be tolerated. Simone stopped pacing. I never treated you badly. You told your book club I was doing billing work as a hobby. You told your mother I preferred a simpler lifestyle. You told your friends Andre was supporting me financially. I was just explaining the situation as I understood it. You were explaining what you assumed. You never asked me about my work. You never asked about my life. You just decided I was broke and struggling and beneath you. That's not fair, isn't it? You grew up in Germantown. Your parents had money, education, status. You looked at a black woman in work clothes living in a garage apartment, and you made assumptions. You saw what you expected to see. Don't make this about race. It's not just about race. It's about class. It's about you deciding that medical billing work was less valuable than corporate marketing. That rental property management was less impressive than office meetings. That a woman who worked from home in sweatpants couldn't possibly have built real wealth. Simone's face was red now. You're twisting everything. You let me believe you were struggling. You lived in a garage apartment. You drove an old car. You dressed like someone who shopped at thrift stores. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to ask. You were supposed to treat your husband's mother with basic respect, regardless of what you thought her financial situation was. I did respect you. You told me I didn't understand modern money management. You suggested I move into subsidized senior housing. You asked me to leave 3 weeks after my son died because having me around was embarrassing to your friends. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. I didn't know. If I'd known you owned the house, if I'd known about the money, I would have acted differently. That's exactly the problem, Simone. You would have acted differently if you'd known I had money, but you should have acted decently regardless. So this is my punishment? You're going to evict me and demand I pay back debts I didn't know existed? I haven't decided what I'm going to do. How generous. Her voice was bitter now. The rich landlord hasn't decided whether to destroy the poor widow. That's not fair. None of this is fair. It's not fair that Andre died. It's not fair that he lied to me about money. It's not fair that I'm 28 years old and facing bankruptcy because of debts I didn't know about. And it's not fair that you're sitting on $1.4 million while I'm trying to figure out how to pay for my husband's funeral expenses. The funeral expenses. Something I hadn't even thought about. How much was the funeral? $11,000. I put it on my credit card because I didn't know what else to do. I've been making minimum payments. $11,000 more debt. On top of everything else. Because she'd tried to give my son a dignified burial. Simone, sit down, please. She sat, exhausted, defeated. The anger had drained out of her, leaving just grief and fear. I need you to understand something, I said. I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm trying to figure out how to live with what's happened. By taking everything from me? You don't have anything to take. Andre didn't leave you anything. His estate is insolvent. Even without the debt to me, you'd be facing the same situation. But with the debt to you, it's worse. Yes, it's worse. She looked at me, really looked at me, for maybe the first time since I'd known her. Did you love him, Andre? Or was he just an investment that didn't pay off? The question felt like a slap. How can you ask me that? Because I don't understand. If you loved him, why did you let him borrow money he couldn't repay? Why did you enable him to build a life he couldn't afford? Why did you teach him that consequences didn't exist? I was trying to help him. You were trying to control him, to keep him dependent on you, to make sure he needed you. That's not true, isn't it? You gave him money but never told his wife. You paid for everything but stayed invisible. You enabled his lies because it kept him close. And now he's dead, and I'm left with the bill. I wanted to argue, wanted to defend myself, but part of me wondered if she was right. Had I been helping Andre or controlling him? Had I been protecting him or preventing him from growing up? What do you want from me, Simone? I want you to forgive the debt. I want you to let me stay in this house until I can figure out my next move. I want you to understand that I'm not your enemy. I'm just a widow trying to survive. And what do I get? What do you want? I thought about that question. What did I want? My son back, impossible. Respect, too late. An acknowledgement that I'd mattered, that my work had value, that I wasn't just the poor mother in the garage apartment. I want you to understand that I built something real, that my life wasn't small or simple or insignificant, that I worked hard and sacrificed and earned everything I have. I understand that now. Do you? Or do you just understand that I have money? Simone was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Maybe that's all I can understand right now. Maybe I'm too angry and scared to see anything else. At least she was honest. The next 2 weeks were strange. Simone and I existed in the same space but lived in different worlds. She'd come home from work, park in the driveway, walk into the house without looking at the garage apartment. I'd see her lights on late into the night, hear her on the phone with her parents, her friends, her lawyer probably. I met with Jerome again on November 20th. "Have you made any decisions?" he asked. "I'm trying to figure out what the right thing is. The right thing legally or the right thing morally? Is there a difference?" "Usually, yes." Jerome pulled out his notes. "Legally, you have every right to demand repayment of Andre's debts. You have documentation, signed promissory notes, clear evidence. You could force the liquidation of his estate assets and pursue Simone for the remaining balance. And morally? Morally, you have to live with yourself after you make that choice. You have to decide if you're comfortable taking money from a 28-year-old widow who just lost her husband, money she didn't know was borrowed, money for a wedding and a car and bills she thought her husband had covered. She asked me to leave my own house. She did, because she didn't know it was your house, because your son lied to her, because you stayed silent. So this is my fault? I didn't say that." "But Denise, you're not just the victim here. You enabled this situation. You let Andre borrow money he couldn't repay. You let him lie to his wife. You chose to stay in that garage apartment instead of having an honest conversation about finances and expectations. I was trying to help my son. I know you were. But help without boundaries isn't help. It's enabling. And now you're both paying the price. You lost your son. She lost her husband. And you're fighting over money neither of you really needs." "I don't need the money. Do you? You have $1. $4 million in assets. You're 60 years old with rental income and retirement savings. The $67,000 Andre owed you, does getting it back change your life?" I thought about that. The answer was no. Getting the money back wouldn't change anything. Wouldn't bring Andre home. Wouldn't undo the years of silence and enabling. "But it's the principle," I said. "The principle of what? Debts must be repaid? Fine. Liquidate the estate assets. Take the $30,000 from his car and accounts. Forgive the rest. Or pursue her for every penny and know that you financially destroyed your daughter-in-law to prove a point. She destroyed herself. She's been living beyond her means for years. With your money. Money you gave freely. Money you never asked to be repaid while Andre was alive. Because he was my son. And she was his wife. She's still family, Denise. The only family you have left who knew Andre. The only person who loved him besides you." That hit me. Hard. Because it was true. Simone had loved Andre. Maybe not perfectly. Maybe she'd loved the version of him he'd pretended to be. But she'd married him. Built a life with him. Lost him. "What do you think I should do?" Jerome was quiet for a moment. "I think you should ask yourself what Andre would want. Not what he deserved, not what would be fair, but what would he want you to do for the woman he loved." I left Jerome's office and drove to the cemetery. Hadn't been back since the funeral. Couldn't face it. But I needed to now. Andre's grave was still fresh, the headstone not yet placed. Just a temporary marker with his name and dates, 1992 to 2024, 32 years, not nearly enough. I sat on the cold ground next to where my son lay buried. "I don't know what to do, baby." She asked me to leave, treated me like I was nothing, but she didn't know. She didn't know about the house or the money or anything real. "You kept it from her. Why did you keep it from her?" The wind blew through the cemetery. No answers. "I'm so angry at you. For dying, for borrowing money you couldn't repay, for lying to your wife, for leaving me alone to clean up this mess. But I'm angry at myself too, for giving you money every time you asked, for never teaching you to say no to yourself, for letting you think money solved problems instead of created them. I sat there for an hour, watching the sun move across the sky, thinking about all the choices that had led to this moment. When I got home, Simone's car was in the driveway. I could see her through the kitchen window, sitting at the table, her head in her hands. I made a decision. Didn't know if it was right or wrong, just knew I couldn't keep living in this limbo, this space between vindication and cruelty. I walked to the main house, knocked on my own front door. Simone opened it, surprised. "Denise, can we talk?" She stepped aside, let me into my own kitchen. We sat at the table, the same table where I'd eaten breakfast every morning for 26 years before moving to the garage apartment. "I've been thinking," I said, "about what to do, about the debt and the house and everything. Have you decided to evict me?" "I've decided we need to have an honest conversation." For the first time since we met, Simone nodded slowly. "Okay. First, I need to know something. If you'd known the truth from the beginning, known that this was my house, that Andre was borrowing money from me, that I was paying for your wedding and your car and your bills, would you have married him?" She looked down at her hands, took a long time to answer. "I don't know. I'd like to think I would have, that I loved him enough that the money wouldn't have mattered. But honestly, I don't know. I grew up believing financial stability was important, that a man should be able to provide. And Andre seemed like he could. Seemed like he had his life together. But he didn't. No, he was drowning, and I didn't see it because you kept throwing him life preservers. I was trying to help him. I know. But Denise, sometimes helping means letting people struggle, letting them fail, letting them learn they can't have everything they want just because they want it." She was right, and I hated that she was right. Hated that this 28-year-old woman who'd dismissed my work and asked me to leave had figured out what I'd failed to learn in 60 years. Sometimes love means saying no. 4 months later, I was sitting in my kitchen. My kitchen, in my house, where I'd lived alone since January. The morning sun came through the windows I'd chosen in 1998, hitting the countertops I'd picked out, warming the floors I'd walked on for 26 years. Everything was the same. Everything was different. Simone had moved out on December 15th. We'd come to an agreement, the kind that left neither of us happy but both of us able to live with ourselves. I forgave $37,000 of Andre's debt. The remaining $30,000 came from liquidating his estate, his car, his 401k, his bank accounts. Everything he'd owned in the world added up to just enough to partially repay his mother. I gave Simone 60 days to find a new place. She moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Midtown, $1,100 a month, the kind of place she'd probably looked at with disdain 3 years ago when she and Andre were house shopping. Now it was what she could afford. I paid for Andre's funeral. The $11,000 she'd put on her credit card, I sent her a check. She didn't cash it for 2 weeks. When she finally did, she didn't call to thank me. I didn't expect her to. We saw each other one more time, the day she came to get Andre's belongings. I'd packed everything carefully. His clothes, his books, his photographs, the little things that had made him my son. Boxes and boxes of a life that had ended too soon. "Thank you for keeping these," she said, standing in the driveway. "They're yours now. They're all I can give you of him." She nodded, started loading boxes into her car, then stopped, turned back. "Denise, can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Do you think he was happy?" "Andre, do you think he was happy with me?" I thought about that question. About my son who'd worked so hard to provide a life he couldn't afford, who'd borrowed money he couldn't repay, who died at 32 with more debt than assets. "I think he loved you. I think he wanted to make you happy. Whether that made him happy, I don't know. I hope so. I loved him too. I want you to know that. Even though I didn't know the truth about the money, I did love him. I know you did." She loaded the last box, closed her trunk. "I'm sorry I asked you to leave. I'm sorry I didn't treat you better. I'm sorry I didn't see you. I'm sorry I let Andre lie to you. I'm sorry I enabled him. I'm sorry I stayed silent when I should have spoken up. Do you think we could ever be family again? Someday?" I looked at this young woman who'd married my son, who'd shared 3 years of his life, who'd been standing next to him when his heart stopped beating. I don't know. Maybe that's not for us to decide right now. Maybe we just need to let time pass and see what's possible. She nodded, got in her car, drove away. I haven't seen her since. I'm back in the main house now. Moved my things from the garage apartment in January. It felt strange at first, like I was trespassing. But slowly, room by room, I've reclaimed my space. I redecorated Andre's room, couldn't stand to keep it as a shrine, turned it into a home office where I manage my rental properties and work on projects that interest me. His photos are still there, on a shelf, but the room belongs to the future now, not the past. I think about him every day. About what I did right and what I did wrong. About whether giving him everything helped him or hurt him. About whether staying silent was love or cowardice. I don't have good answers, just the knowledge that I did what I thought was best and it wasn't enough. It's never enough. My friend Lorraine from church came by last week. We sat on my back porch, drinking sweet tea, talking about life. "You did the right thing," she said. "Setting boundaries with Simone, taking back your house." Did I? Sometimes I wonder if I just proved I was as petty as she thought I was. You weren't petty. You were human. She disrespected you, asked you to leave your own home, and when she found out the truth, you still forgave half the debt and paid for the funeral. That's not petty. That's grace with boundaries. Maybe she was right. Maybe grace with boundaries was the best any of us could do. I still drive my Toyota Sensex Honda. Still wear my comfortable clothes. Still collect rent from my properties and fix things myself when I can. Nothing about my appearance has changed. But I'm not invisible anymore. Not to myself. The other day, I was at the hardware store buying supplies to fix a leaking faucet at one of my rentals. A young woman, maybe 30, watched me load caulk and washers into my cart. "Do you know what you're doing with all that?" she asked, not unkindly. "I've been fixing faucets for 35 years. I wish I knew how to do that stuff. My landlord charges me $200 every time something breaks." "YouTube," I said. "That's how I learned half of what I know, that and trial and error." She smiled. "Maybe I'll try that." As I walked away, I thought about Simone, about how she'd looked at me the same way 3 years ago, like someone who needed help, like someone who didn't understand the modern world. But I do understand. I understand that wealth isn't always visible. That success doesn't require designer clothes or new cars or impressive job titles. That the woman in work clothes fixing her own plumbing might have more money in the bank than the woman paying $200 for a plumber. I understand that sometimes love means saying no, that giving without boundaries creates dependence, not gratitude, that protecting someone from consequences doesn't protect them from pain. And I understand that I lost my son, not to bad decisions or borrowed money or lies, just to life ending too soon. Everything else, the debt, the house, the conflict with Simone, those are just the complicated pieces we leave behind when someone we love disappears. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? What city? What country? Drop it in the comments below. Because this story about invisible work, unacknowledged sacrifice, and the price of staying silent resonates across every culture, every country, every family where someone gives everything and gets taken for granted. Hit that like button if this story made you think about the invisible labor in your own family, the people who give quietly, the sacrifices nobody acknowledges, the work that gets dismissed because it doesn't fit someone's image of success. Share this if you know someone who's been taken for granted, someone whose contributions have been minimized, someone who stayed silent to keep the peace and is now wondering if silence was love or cowardice. Someone who needs to hear that setting boundaries isn't the same as being cruel, even when it feels that way. And subscribe for more real stories about family, money, grief, and what happens when the person who connected you disappears and you're left trying to figure out if you're family at all. Because the truth is, some relationships don't survive honesty. Some connections only work when nobody asks hard questions. See you in the next video.